Good evening to all of you who are joining us for the February meeting by the Washington Association of Professional Anthropologists. I want to thank all of you for making time to be here, and am very grateful to WAPA for sponsoring this and to the program committee for putting this together. But I'm most appreciative to my former students and now young colleagues who are here to share their personal stories about from when they left here being St. Mary's College of Maryland. I've been teaching at a small public honors college for the past 3+ decades. We're about not so far downriver from Washington, D.C. Beautiful place. If you haven't had a chance to visit, I hope you will be able to come down once the weather warms up. But last year at the SfAA meeting, we put together a session on the pathway from student to professional. And I thought that as we were talking with the program committee and looked at last month's program by the Career Readiness Commission, followed by the National Association of Professional Anthropologists, that this would be a great opportunity to really listen to some personal stories about young anthropologists and how they've really used anthropology to get to where they are today. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce, these are young professionals who just finished their undergraduate degrees 7 or 8 years ago. And they've all gone on for professional training in a master's program. They'll tell you more about that. And so in preparation for this and trying to kind of link into some of the discussion from last month, I asked them to think about and speak to transformative learning experiences that they may have had in the course of their training, whether that was courses, field schools, internship, study abroad, and also to talk about mentor relationships. I think we all know and appreciate the value of good and effective mentoring. And then just to talk about their pathway of becoming a professional, what their job title is, and their, which doesn't necessarily reflect their identity and how they go about their work. I've also asked them, and this may come out in different ways, just based on their experience, what do they see as new areas of opportunity or interest for, especially for young anthropologists, not for anybody like myself who only likes to be around young people. I'm no longer a young person by any stretch of the imagination. And then finally, there may be some reflection and feedback to anthropology programs, but I think more importantly, they're hoping that some current students will be in the audience tonight. And so that's some of the things I've asked them to talk about. I think you're going to be fascinated by these stories. What we've talked about doing is each person will talk for 10 or 15 minutes, and then take some questions. We have 4 people speaking tonight. Our 5th friend and colleague had some family obligations and wasn't able to make it. And then at the end, if there's time, we can just talk as a group. And so with that, it's a real pleasure to introduce Clara Richards, who will start things for us. Clara graduated from St. Mary's College about 7 years ago. She went on to University of Maryland College Park and earned a master's in public health. She's currently the program coordinator for the Population Health Department of Howard County General Hospital in the Johns Hopkins Medical System, where, as she says, culture counts and applied anthropology is pivotal. So Clara, please take us there.
What an introduction. So yes, that is my job title, but as you'll learn throughout my presentation, I mostly feel like an anthropologist. And that is probably one of the more important titles that I hold throughout my experience. So I'm titling my presentation this time around, Once an Anthropologist, Always an Anthropologist, because it seems appropriate, anthropology in the real world and all that. First, talk a little bit about my anthropological training and some of the points of interest that Roberts was talking about, specifically about my experiences that have made me so attuned to anthropology and some of the mentors that I've had along the way, as well as points of interest for me, and I feel like for new students as well, transferable skills and how I think about anthropology overall and how I use it in my everyday career and life. Then I want to talk a little bit about how I maintain anthropology in terms of academically, or maintain my skills and tools, as I'll reference later, and what does that all mean? So what, which is a reference to a former professor and mentor who anyone who's been to St. Mary's College of Maryland knows very well in the anthropology department. So first, like Robert said, I have a BA in anthropology and a master's in public health, specifically behavioral and community health. And I've also recently gone on to be certified as a health education specialist. So you can see that I've sort of taken a kind of different direction with anthropology, meaning I didn't get a graduate degree in anthropology. However, I still use it quite a lot. And because I'm a really intense independent thinker, thank you, St. Mary's, I did end up taking an anthropology course at the graduate level just by talking myself into one. It actually turned out really well. So the first thing to know about my specific anthropological training, especially at St. Mary's during the 2010-2014 years, is that they focused a lot on the toolkit of anthropology, which are the foundational tools and skills that anthropologists use in order to do their research and interact with different cultures and groups of people. First thing you'll see is the participant observation, that kind of thing. We say it all the time. Get involved, observe, take notes, engage with people. And that's something I use all the time, from teaching and learning to living on the other side of the world, not speaking the language and learning it for the first time. We also learned other qualitative and quantitative research methods, and especially something like teamwork and productive independent work, which comes in handy when you're working in an institution, as well as independent projects, and mindful discussion, which is a skill that I use literally every day, especially in my work environment. In addition to these toolkit skills that we use as anthropologists, is also the idea of experiential learning, or these transformative opportunities. First thing is presentations, and I don't necessarily just mean presentations in the classroom, presentations like this at conferences. I've given presentations at other conference meetings at the APHA as an anthropologist studying and building a community health worker program for a nonprofit in Frederick, Maryland. We've done lots of projects on behavior and medicine and behavioral and healthcare, and other internships that have built up to the job that I have now, internships in oral history, which I was specifically referred to by a professor at St. Mary's, as well as internships that I specifically, again, talked myself into as a proactive person in grad school for the Institute for Public Health Innovation in DC, and just called them up and said, you need me as your intern, and they agreed. So that kind of toolkit, those skills, are less about the research techniques you use and more about your confidence in using them, being able to apply them, and being able to apply them flexibly to different situations. And part of understanding those transferable skills and how to apply them appropriately is understanding that those skills are in fact transferable and relevant to a number of different areas of interest and disciplines. Here I have on the screen this little graphic that shows some of the distribution of anthropology and how I think about it and how I used it quite a lot, observing, understanding, participating, and advocating. And then how I transferred those skills to public health, which is what I tend to practice in now. The same skills apply, just in slightly different proportions. And they also provide a good foundation when learning new skills, like here I've added coordinating and producing change, and specifically from the planning perspective. So one of the questions you asked is, what does anthropology mean to me? And for me, anthropology can be quite simple. It's about the relationships, about how we express ourselves, how we connect with ourselves and each other and our groups and communities. However, Dr. Ford, one of our really beloved professors, has a definition that I paraphrase and use when I'm explaining anthropology to people who don't know what anthropology is. Anthropology is learned, is shared, it's dynamic. It's everything we do and think and act upon. This expansive definition of anthropology and culture really allows me to think about anthropology in a broad perspective and apply it more freely to other contexts. So anthropology is the systematic study and practice of culture to help understand persons specifically in populations, seeking to understand cultural experiences, minimizing disruption and maximizing change. Those are the key points I feel of practicing anthropology. And there are smaller skills, by smaller I mean sort of less iconic for anthropologists, but definitely something that we use quite often when explaining what anthropology is to people who may not know what they are. Database and collections management, intimate understanding of what it means to be a participant, observer, working well with others, advocating, etc. All things that I've then transferred to public health. So for the rest of the world, specifically applied anthropology, I would use this definition of anthropology, applied anthropology from the SfAA. Applied anthropologists work to solve real world problems by using anthropological methods and ideas. Again, by using this definition, it's quite easy to see how a public health practitioner can be an anthropologist and continues to be one. So how I maintain my anthropology or my toolkit skills, my perspective and approach using anthropology in my world, the short answer is I just do. I think about it when I make interactions. I think about it when I'm creating programs, when I'm guiding people, when I'm answering questions, when I'm starting something new, especially a new project in the community, since that's one of the places that I'm working quite often. The longer answer, how I maintain in the real world, would be having discussions with colleagues, connecting with advocacy opportunities, being mindful, taking care of myself, making connections, and then continuing to apply those techniques and approaches every day. I apply them to my many titles that have anthropologists not included in any of them, but anthropology itself is included in every single one of them. Being an executive producer for a diverse digital theater platform, serving on the Racial Equity Committee, recently becoming a diversity, equity, inclusion consultant, a creative strategist, program manager, and community builder. All these things I've been able to do because of and in support of anthropology. So what? That's the big question Dr. Ford always asks us. We would come in wide-eyed with all these ideas of what we wanted to do for our research, and she would say, why should I care? Why should anyone care? What is the point? And I think the point is, which has become even more clear as time's gone on, that everyone needs anthropology, meaning everyone needs to understand that approach to understanding each other and our perspectives. That critical, empathetic thinking is a crucial and critical skill that we haven't been able to exercise as compassionately as we really need to, which anthropology considers a requirement. There is a high need for systematic cultural decoding, and that is efficient and consistent, and that's the systematic part of anthropology. And equity depends on these skills because it gives us the opportunity to learn while recognizing our own worldview and taking into account others' perspectives. So what's the truth about anthropology, at least from my perspective? Being an anthropologist can be challenging. It can be challenging to be the one in the room advocating for a wider understanding of the culture or community. It can be challenging to have to explain what your degree is to a physician or a panel or a committee or whoever, or explain why your anthropology degree makes you unique or special, or makes you qualified to do the things you want to do in the world. But I also say that being an anthropologist is fun. I've been able to read and present and go to museums and graduate and participate in cultures and things that I never thought I would. I got to go to Taiwan on scholarship, which I partially received from an organization in order to understand, do a mini ethnography on their cultural and public health practices and programs that I could then take back to the US with me. We continued to use these perspectives of anthropology to be good voices in the rooms that we're in, whether those rooms recognize us as anthropologists or not. It still doesn't take away from the value that anthropology brings. So if there are students who are interested in being an anthropologist, understand that even if there can be challenging at times, it really is important, and it does bring a certain richness to your life and experience. And I gotta say, most anthropologists I know are not afraid of a challenge. So I'll stop here and take any questions.
Hi, Clara. I actually had one, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You alluded to a lot of the challenges that go along with translating anthropology to non-anthropologists. What kind of strategies do you use to accomplish that?
So as you noticed in the presentation, I had sort of an abbreviated definition of culture and anthropology as a whole. If you don't have a favorite one, get one. Knowing very clearly and concisely what you define anthropology to be is a very good strategy to have. People like a very simple definition. Even though it's more complex than that, it's easier to have people access what anthropology is if you have a definition they can more easily understand and relate to. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, don't get offended if people don't know what anthropology is. I didn't know what anthropology was until I went to St. Mary's, and anthropology kind of found me.
Hey, Clara, I'm going to read a question in the chat for you, just so that I don't know if everybody's on the chat on this, but the question is, how does the anthropological community help uplift you through your challenges?
That's a good question. This is probably the first example. People reaching out to me to participate in Meeting of the Minds of Anthropologists. And actually, when we started this last year, we found that we had quite a rich discussion just about what it's like being an anthropologist in the real world, so to speak, in our jobs and lives. And that colleague support, people who've been through the type of training you've been through, was really uplifting. And also, I've found that more information in general about people who do sort of social research in general has been useful in taking care of myself and self-care overall, how to know where your limits are, how to stay engaged but not burn out. So that is a part of the anthropological community, more formal things like this, but also just finding friends that also do anthropology has been super uplifting.
Bill? Hi.
Hi, Suzanne.
Can I comment? Hi. I apologize for coming in late. I don't know what went wrong. I just kept getting kicked out and whatever. Bad computer today. Clara, this isn't a question so much as an observation and maybe appreciation of your listing skills, you're listing attributes of an anthropologist and so on. And usually, or so much these days, when everybody's job oriented, people give very tangible skills. Yes, you must have statistics. You must learn to manage projects. You must learn how to present and so on. But what I appreciated was you really included things like empathy and listening and just attitudes of openness to the other, which I don't think we're taught that much anymore. I mean, when I was taught, that was a long, long time ago. But I don't hear that in the discussion these days. And I just wanted to thank you for acknowledging and appreciating that part of anthropology. So good job.
Thanks. And I gotta say, those are the skills that I use every single day.
I had a quick question. Sorry, please forgive me. I'm cooking as we speak, but this has allowed me to join. I just had a question that knowing how quantitatively focused and financially minded medical administrators tend to be, have you found effective strategies to explain the worth of holistic qualitative approaches?
Yes, actually, that was a part of research I did, building a community health worker program for a nonprofit in Frederick. One thing that I've learned is how to properly translate what's important to us in society, us as anthropologists, to what's important to institutions, because sometimes they feel as though their financial goals may not be congruent with what is best for communities and people, but in fact they are quite often in the long term very aligned. So I try to explain what I'm looking to do or the priorities I'm looking to fulfill in language that institutions can understand. Meaning I try to get to the bottom line, I try to talk about efficiency, but then I move that conversation into the spaces of the goal and the mission and the overall vision of the institution or hospital, because that is often more community or social minded. The idea is you don't necessarily have to choose between staying afloat as a financially minded institution and actually serving the community that you sought to serve. And once I make that connection, usually leadership is very amenable to trying out new ideas or trying out new things that are going to reach the people that they're actually looking to reach. I think that they can get really pigeonhole focused into what will be have the most financial advantage. But if you're talking long-term development and strategy, and then frame it as not only is this going to allow you to continue to do your work technically, but it's also going to gain the trust and understanding of the people you want to serve, that's usually the type of framing that does the best job for me.
I had a quick question, and I'm sure this is something that y'all hear a lot from students, so I apologize if you're rehashing. And again, I'm sorry I missed, Clara, your opening presentation. I am interested in the fields of anthropology, and I'm wondering, when it comes to the job market, does it tend to be that people are hiring anthropologists, or that you try to sell your skills in jobs? And my worry is that I am very interested in actual anthropology, and I don't want to do other jobs. I want to do these jobs.
I don't know if that question is specifically for me, but I can say that there are jobs that are specifically for anthropologists. They just don't know they actually want an anthropologist. Like, for example, something that's quite popular, user experience, is intensely anthropology. That is nothing but anthropology, understanding people and what they want and how they use things and how their culture influences their behaviors. That's user experience. They don't know they want an anthropologist often, but they usually do. So I think you should think about whether you really care about the title of anthropology or the functions of an anthropologist.
Clara, thanks very much. I think you did a great job and really got us off on a great footing here. So I'm gonna introduce our next speaker. And our next speaker does have anthropologist, I think, in her job title. I'm happy to introduce Katie Boyle. Katie graduated the same year that Clara did, 7 short years ago. And I'm just going to read from her bio just in case you didn't get a chance, but she works for the National Park Service as a historian and archaeologist and utilizes her applied anthropology toolkit on a daily basis. She majored in anthropology at St. Mary's College and was focusing on archaeology, minored in history and museum studies, and then spent time interning and working in cultural resources management before going to graduate school, and found a very practical program that fit what she wanted to do at the University of Maryland, College Park, where she piloted the dual Masters of Applied Anthropology and Historic Preservation. The program demonstrates the value of applied anthropology and its complementary nature with historic preservation. And she says that the training that she received at St. Mary's and College Park prepared her for the real world. And so with that introduction, I am happy to introduce and present to you Katie Boyle. Katie, take us there.
Hello. Hopefully my internet cooperates. Thanks for the introduction, and Clara, that was a fabulous presentation. So it's a toughie to follow. So I'm going to talk to you about my St. Mary's and UMD experiences and all the crazy adventures I've had in between with anthropology. Let's see. Okay, so who am I? I have, as Bill said, a bachelor's from St. Mary's in anthropology with the history and the museum studies minors, and then University of Maryland, the dual masters in applied anthropology and historic preservation. So I am an archaeologist and a preservationist. My current job title is a historian, but I wear so many different hats at work. I am an archaeologist, so I get to go outside and, do the archaeology thing and check on archaeological sites and do field work. In that sense, I get to do condition assessments on buildings. I get to work with a lot of different groups of people, and the anthropology has really helped me with that. So it's just a little bit of who I am. So back in the day at St. Mary's, I thought I wanted to be a history major, but then I came across anthropology, and very early on in my intro to anthropology class, I learned that archaeology was just hands-on history. So that sounded really, really great. As I moved beyond my first year, I really started to focus on archaeology, and the program at St. Mary's really provided the practical experience that we needed both inside and outside of the classroom. It was very much a learn by doing class experience. The courses helped us understand the importance of interacting with your peers through field work, lab work, research, and discussion. So after taking the anthropology toolkit class, I was asked to be the teaching assistant for that course the following year, and assisted with lab duties and teaching the lab methodologies class or aspect of that class. Other classes like my archaeology practicum course, we learned the importance of revisiting previous research with new questions that hadn't been asked before. In my research methods class, the track that I was in, the archaeology track, we learned how to do a phase 1 archaeological survey. So you actually like got to go out and figure out the distribution of artifacts across the whole landscape. We analyzed our findings and shared those with not just in the class, but with other archaeologists from Southern Maryland. So the hands-on training was really an invaluable part of my development as a up-and-coming archaeologist. And at St. Mary's, we got good at wearing many hats. So throughout our coursework, something I really appreciated was that our professors didn't sugarcoat the reality of post-St. Mary's life. They told us that there really aren't that many jobs in academia for people in our field. So instead of dissuading us from following anthropology wherever it would take us, they told us that there are possibilities beyond just school, including cultural resources management, going into government, NGOs, nonprofits. They would bring professionals to come talk to us sometimes and provide opportunities to act as like research assistants and teaching assistants. And they really supported us during and after college to find these different job opportunities. So the anthropology program really fostered a community of interdisciplinary study, which is why I was able to do all the things that I was able to do. The courses in a lot of classes were cross-listed, so that really helped me to still pursue some history and museum studies, and being able to take advantage of different parts of those majors and minors, so I could actually like take advantage of study abroad study tours. I got to go to Greece and the American Southwest for a study tour to look at museums and national parks and archaeological sites. I was able to take a field school at historic St. Mary's City. And then other aspects of class, they really worked in field trips. So we would go to places, we'd go to, how exotic, we'd go to Baltimore. We'd go up to Washington, DC or Williamsburg to see different museum collections, repositories, and experience other museums to kind of see how they would do things. And it helped us to build that kind of global perspective on what we were trying to do. So. After St. Mary's, my first job was helping to document an 18th century manor house in Southern Maryland, which really paved the way for my interest in historic preservation. So while working on one of my measured drawings, I got a job offer from a cultural resource management firm that I had recently interviewed with. And at that point, I was literally told that this would be a join the Navy, see the world experience, because we would be on the road a lot. We'd get to, do surveys in different states all over the place. So that was, I didn't know what was coming, and it was a really great experience. And it was my experiences gained at St. Mary's that allowed me to get this job and to, I think, just exist in that job well. So just, even though it's just a field technician who was being told where to dig, the practical experiences from St. Mary's had trained me well for, playing well with others. And for putting up with very strange situations, like when horses would come over and try to get in the way of what you were doing, or dealing with, disgruntled cows or disgruntled people because they didn't want you on your property. So I didn't realize it at the time, but my anthropology background is really what helped me to adapt so quickly to life on the road all the time. So when winter rolled around that year, after doing this for several months, the projects began to shut down. So I started to kind of apply to other jobs and think about what I wanted to do next, because I was like, well, I don't want to get laid off every year. That kind of stinks. So I actually landed an internship in Colorado at Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, which is a really fabulous internship experience because you get not only like field internships and lab internships, and I was in the lab, but there were also interns focused on education and outreach and Native American outreach, and several other areas, which was really, really interesting. So just having the opportunity to work with an institution that collaborates with Native American communities like they did, and to interact with these communities deepened our perspectives and our connections to the land that we were working on. And after I came back east, I started a museum job and did some more CRM and started to think about going to school, because that summer really kind of changed, helped me figure out what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into archaeological education in some way, shape, or form. So that it was just helpful to work at an institution that really worked on that. So before I started at University of Maryland, I was working on applications, and I actually had a meeting with the then department chair, Paul Shackle, to talk about the master's program. And we talked for a very long time. And he recommended that I look at internships through the National Council for Preservation Education. So I did. And that organization had a lot of internship opportunities with the Park Service and several other government organizations, but mostly the Department of the Interior. And through that, I was fortunate enough to get an internship at the Museum Resource Center, which is what I call the Indiana Jones warehouse, because it has our the region's artifacts. It's a repository. It's a very, very, very cool facility. And there's a lot of history in those walls. So after that internship, I found out about midway through that internship that I was accepted in the University of Maryland for grad school. And so by some miracle for me, I was able to stay on with this facility as on a cooperative agreement with the Park Service and keep doing what I had been doing. And I had maybe too much fun. I don't know. Outside time and artifacts were involved, so that generally makes me pretty happy. Anyway, so at University of Maryland, I also wore a lot of hats, and this program really helped me to helped with my professionalization, and it's a program built for making you a more versatile job candidate, at least in my opinion. It helped in my mind that it also had really good connections with the Park Service, because I was like, that's where I would like to go. So I learned just how well St. Mary's had prepared me for this almost inevitable return to the classroom, and just how much my undergrad and post-undergrad experiences had shaped my perspectives. So St. Mary's had allowed me to build a baseline toolkit of practical skills in both anthropology and archaeology, but University of Maryland's program really built on that for me, and allowed us to explore what it would mean to be a responsible, ethical professional in our chosen field. In the classes, we learned how to do our elevator pitch to describe ourselves and our work. We learned the importance of networking, which allowed us to form connections that are actually helping me in my current job, which is kind of cool. And I remember after looking through the audience here tonight, I was like, I had definitely met you during one of those nights. There's a few people out here I remember seeing. So like this whole thing, it connected me to the DC Historic Preservation Office, and I was able to kind of solidify my network with the DC archaeology community. And I've been able to use my anthropological knowledge in my preservation courses, including our capstone class, where we developed a toolkit to engage with and document LGBTQ heritage in urban settings, specifically Baltimore in this case, hence the Old Bay theme. So getting down to the end. So to me, what does it mean to be an anthropologist? It means that you look for ways to continue to hone your skills so that you can wear all those hats. In my current job, as I said, I'm a historian, but I manage leases of historic structures in our park, and I serve as the Secretary of the Interior's qualified archaeologist. I also help mentor interns and wear my interpretive hat every time I step out of the office and interact with people. I think taking advantage of career development opportunities between courses and trainings and attending conferences really helps. And especially now because there's a lot of virtual conferences. So if you can swing it, like that's the way to go. And I'm actually back in school again because I decided to go for the grad certificate at University of Maryland that they just started a couple of years ago, the Cultural and Heritage Resources Management, because there were a couple things that I've noticed in the last couple of years that just I didn't quite have when I entered the real world. So that program actually has a couple, it's helping me fill in some gaps. I've also used my anthropology side of my brain for a recent website project with Grand Canyon National Park. And then really one of the best things that I could have done for myself in anthropology is learn how to network. So not only does it help you to share ideas and to gain new perspectives, but it might provide you a chance to mentor the next generation of up and coming professionals. So I'm currently at a point in my career where I see it as it's time to start paying it forward. I've been able to help guide interns through the basics of archaeological fieldwork and site documentation, and help them prepare for professional presentations at national and international conferences. So what's the moral of the story for me? It's to never stop learning, and through applying your knowledge, you continue to learn more. So that's where I'm at. Thanks, everybody. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen if I can find the thing. Or not. Technology doesn't like me tonight, y'all. Too many screens. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Katie. That was great. And yeah, I know exactly how that technology works or doesn't work sometimes. So
it showed up at the top of one screen and not the other screen. I was like, oh, the perils of dual screens.
Yeah. So we can take a few questions or comments, I think now, if there are any in the audience.
If not, that's okay too. If we don't, then I'm just going to go hide now.
Thanks, Katie. Let me go to our next presenter. So Katie was in the class of 2014 with Clara, and our next speaker, Becca Quick, also in the class of 2014. So you can see 2014 was a great year. It was a great year. So Becca Quick graduated from St. Mary's in 2014 with Katie and Clara, and went on to the Applied Anthropology program at the University of Maryland, College Park. Again, I'm just going to read. She's currently the project manager with a policy research nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. Before that, she was working as a grants manager with a housing organization in D.C. And before that, humanitarian organizations based in Iraq. She'll tell you about her training in anthropology, but she's developed a passion for cultural awareness in human rights and development. She's done research on this topic in the Gambia, West Africa, and Malta. And so with that, I am presenting to you Becca Quick. Becca, please go ahead, take us there. I think Matt is going to work the slides though.
Yes, thank you so much, Bill, and I appreciate you doing that for me, Matt. So yes, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experience from a student of anthropology to a practitioner. And you can go to the next slide. As Bill mentioned, I graduated from St. Mary's in 2014 and then went on to UMD for the MAA and graduated in 2016. And then I'll talk a little bit about my professional work and give a very illuminating conclusion as well. So you can go to the next slide. I do want to say thank you so much, Katie and Claire, for your presentations. I was taking notes and you're definitely going to hear some common themes throughout mine as well. So at St. Mary's, where we were all lucky enough to attend, there's a beautiful sunset, as Bill said. Please go visit when you can. It's a wonderful, peaceful place. And I was a anthropology major and a African diaspora studies minor. Go to the next slide. On the St. Mary's website, it mentions LEAD. LEAD stands for Learning Through Experiential and Applied Discovery. St. Mary's didn't have LEAD when I was there, but our curriculum was called the core curriculum, and experiential learning was definitely a part of it, and it has been a part of St. Mary's for a while. The goal of core was to provide students with a general education in many subjects. I'm taking a freshman seminar, math, science, humanities, and it was set to provide us with skills for expression and well-roundedness, such as critical thinking, oral expression, and civil and global engagement. Depending on your major, St. Mary's projects were required. They're an undergraduate thesis with a lengthy research paper and presentation or poster that follows. The anthropology department at St. Mary's, their motto was learning anthropology by doing anthropology. As Katie mentioned, the world was our classroom, and we really did learn by doing. Our classes were interactive themselves, as well as like the way that the core and the anthropology department were structured. We had outside of the classroom learning as well, like Katie mentioned, in terms of historic St. Mary's. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see my experience of learning by doing anthropology was largely through my study abroad experiences. Out of those listed on this slide, the first two, the Gambia and Gozo in Malta, are probably the most that had an impact on my academic and professional career as an anthropologist. In the Gambia, I did an internship with the Child Protection Alliance, and this program was a semester long. It was very connected to the anthropology department at St. Mary's, thanks to Bill. And so I received a lot of credits through this program. So I did an internship. I took courses at University of the Gambia, took language courses, and it was a really immersive experience and influenced my education and part of my career. My internship was with the Child Protection Alliance, which was an interagency collaborative that works to promote and protect children's rights through different strategies throughout the country. At the end of the semester there, I was able to produce a qualitative research paper based on participant observation at my internship location, as well as events that the NGO put on and interviews with staff and participants of the events. And my paper detailed how the CPA was utilizing traditional Gambian values to promote children's rights there. And this was then part of my St. Mary's project, as well as my work in Gozo, where I attended a field school that was a bit different. It was very unstructured, and I could choose a research topic, which I chose to research refugees and human rights on the island. I really learned here how to fend for myself in the field. I went from just kind of taking interviews at a local restaurant to finding a space that provided resources for refugees to interviewing local government officials. And I had no connections when arriving there. It was really self-led. And while I didn't gain college credits, it did lead to a chapter in my St. Mary's project. So it's safe to say that I did a lot of learning by experiencing at St. Mary's. And then the next slide, at University of Maryland, it was a little bit different. I chose to do an MAA there because I wanted an applied career, and there is a internship requirement there, which I thought would be really helpful for me to gain kind of professional skills and ways to talk about myself and how I could be, as Clara mentioned, transferable skills, how I could transfer my anthropological skills to different positions that I was interested in obtaining after graduation. So I did my internship at the Coalition for Human Rights in Development, which informed my master's thesis on the World Bank's relationship with human rights nonprofits. And if you go to the next slide, so UMD helped me focus on a more professional track. The courses were structured very similar to St. Mary's. We had to take theory and research methods, but there was a more diverse set of classes that we could take as it was a bigger institution. And as Katie also mentioned, I appreciated the emphasis on networking, which is, this is actually the same slide from my SfAA presentation. So, oh, you can't see on the screen there, but I have a WAPA logo that I had put in my SfAA presentation because I did not know about WAPA as, well, maybe I had been told about it, but it didn't really stick for me as much as when I went to UMD and was really thinking about, okay, how to get a job afterwards. And so we had WAPA members visit our applied class the first semester at UMD, and we were encouraged to attend meetings. And I went to many meetings, both, informal and formally and connected with individuals there. And as you can see, I'm still connected with WAPA, which is lovely. And the internship aspect, I actually ended up having a couple internships throughout my master's there, which then helped me focus my interest on international development anthropology, focusing on the World Bank safeguards, which were being revamped at the time I was interning at the Coalition for Human Rights in Development in the summer of 2015. And that's what my thesis was focusing on. But the newest part probably for me attending UMD was the professional selling yourself, the elevator pitch, and how to convince those outside of anthropology that my research and my experience was relevant. I worked with, there's a lot of either policy majors or even law students who were interning with me at the same time. And so I was a little bit of the odd duck there. So it was fun to practice with them at, how to explain how anthropology was relevant. And then the next slide there, this all led me to, from anthropology major to a grants or project manager. I think it's a slide before that, not maybe if it's there. Professional work. My professional work.
It's unfortunately not showing up. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, no worries. It's kind of, these are arbitrary slides anyway. So my professional work, which I'm saying means since I graduated from UMD, has been in grants and project management. And it started in the humanitarian sector because I don't know if you know this, but as a what was I, 23, 24-year-old walking around DC with my resume going to international development organizations or banks. It was really tricky to get a foot in the door there. I did know some anthropologists who worked at them, and they had, PhDs. And so I was lucky enough, though, to get a job with a humanitarian organization and learn about more of the emergency than the development side of international work. And so, as you can see here, it was first with RI, Relief International in DC, and then I moved with them to between Erbil and Baghdad, Iraq, between 2017 and 2018 as a grant assistant. This is essentially the job that became available and was, I guess, the most sought after job for young professionals at my organization at the time. And so I hopped on this skill set and became a grants manager in Erbil, and then a grants manager in DC with a housing organization. And then I actually took a fellowship course, a career fellowship course with University of Maryland alumni. And I was like, how do I get back to a bit of a more research-based institution and kind of bring in like maybe some project management skills? I was considering getting a PMP. And through that kind of career fellowship program, I learned all about my transferable skills and how to look for jobs that were in policy research and project management. And so I got a job at Urban Institute last summer. And I'll talk a little bit about my possible transition. I'm at a possible career transition now, because it wasn't quite, I guess, what I had thought it would be. It's a lot of procurement and budget management, which is a lot of what project management is. But I am looking at potentially going on to getting a master's in library and information science. So we'll see how that goes, and a little bit about I guess how I saw project management as being part of my career was the solving problems aspect of applied anthropology. I think that's something that Clara had mentioned, that the SfAA defines applied anthropology as solving human problems. And that was a huge selling point for me in a lot of job interviews. I think someone had asked Clara that question, how they kind of talk about or define anthropology in job interviews. And that's how I do it, is I'm a problem solver as a project manager. And so I always give that definition of applied anthropology. I'm here to solve problems. And I've definitely taken many career-centered personality and skills tests, and it's always comes to that conclusion. And I think that whether it was my anthropological experience that informed me being a problem solver, or I was a natural problem solver and then found anthropology, I'm not sure which came first. But since graduating with my master's in applied anthropology, I've noticed and appreciated how my anthropological lens of assessing a situation helps me solve the problems. And I've thought a lot about the question, do you think of yourself as an anthropologist or doing anthropology? And I think of myself as an anthropologist who isn't necessarily doing anthropology every day. I think the skills that I'm using now are more so those people skills, the listening skills and learning. I'm as Katie and Clara have mentioned, always learning, and I'm just always learning from others. And I think that's really helpful in a lot of my jobs, because I'm soaking in a lot of information and trying to kind of translate it to for the broader organization. And so, let's see, the next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, I'm in this little transition stage. So it was kind of interesting for me to think about how to form my presentation today. And I often have struggled throughout my academic and professional career in just being interested in too much. And I think that's what drew me to anthropology a little bit in the first place. There was just the vast array of classes you can take, cultures you can immerse yourself in. and then approaching, my field that I was then interested in after the Gambia and human rights from an anthropological perspective, that was just perfect for me. And then when I entered my career and became professional in grants and project management, it was something I didn't intend to necessarily go into, but I do have these skills now in project management. And so I definitely want to be able to transfer them in other ways and search for something more meaningful. And I recently spoke with an oral historian who has an MLIS degree, Kelly Navies, and she said that the thing she loved about library and information science is that you can bring your skill set to it and use it in so many different ways. And that was a bit of an aha moment talking to her, because I'm realizing I'm so fascinated by this new career and how anthropology really prepared me for that. So anyway, just to say, just keep swimming, just keep doing like what you love to do. And I definitely think that, eventually it all kind of clicks. But that's all for me today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Becca. Great story. Great, and the story is still unfolding. We'll wait for a couple of minutes and see if anybody has any comments or questions.
Bill, it looks like there's a couple questions in the chat.
Thank you. Let's see. Comments in the chat, not questions. I don't see the questions in the chat. Yeah, I see comments. I see. Great job, Becca.
So Montague Chevalier asks, how do anthropologists in their work recognize potential ethical problems and collaborate with colleagues to find a conclusion to these issues?
Okay.
Yeah, I'd also like to hear if my other panelists have something to say about that one later, possibly as well. But I'm curious to know the context of that, if it's like within the work environment, and please feel free to unmute if you want to elaborate on that. But I will say one thing that comes to mind is, we're focus groups, which is, a typical qualitative. I recently, as Clara mentioned, her various titles are, one is committee member. So I'm a part of a committee, and I definitely think of my committee as a little focus group, and we're also the first, committee in my center at Urban. And so we're a little guinea pig focus group. And so just kind of learning from my colleagues and talking and collaborating and coming to conclusions with, kind of getting everyone's perspective. Ooh, maybe Katie then can talk a little bit to the aspect of interacting with museums and items.
Possibly. Let's see, just as an anthropologist just doing it, I can also do this, think on it a little bit if we want to give Les a chance to go to give his presentation. But just as an anthropologist, I'd like to think on this as well. If you give me a couple minutes, I'll come up with something.
Fair enough, Katie. I think that what we'll do, if there aren't any other questions right now, is I will introduce our so-called, I guess, next speaker. And our next speaker, we save the junior members from St. Mary's College. Clara, Becca, Katie all graduated in 2014. Leslie Walker graduated in 2013, so he's a full year ahead of them now. So, but Les graduated from St. Mary's, and he'll tell you about his training. He went on to the University of South Florida. But let me tell you a little bit about what he does now. Les has had a really interesting career already. He's currently the Social Justice and Scholarly Programs lead at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. He develops public programming and outreach activities that advance visitors' knowledge of African American history and culture through social justice workshops, panel discussions, book talks, and film screenings. He majored in both anthropology and Spanish, and his MA, as I said, is from USF in South Florida, and a graduate certificate in museum education from Oregon State University. So with that, here is Leslie Walker, and Leslie will tell us his story and take us there. Go ahead, Les.
Alrighty, thank you, Bill, for such a wonderful introduction. And I promise that I know there's some wonderful questions that you all had, and I promise that I won't be too long. I don't have a presentation that I would use this screen share for, and just permit me just a brief moment to just walk through my career and what I've gleaned through my very nuanced and multitude of job experiences to now finding myself firmly cemented in the work of museums, and particularly museum education. And as Bill introduced, I attended St. Mary's College from 2009 to 2013. Next year will be 10 years since my graduation, which to some people they might see as, oh, you're still young, but to me it's like I'm so old, because when I return to St. Mary's, it's a whole new generation of people that are there and excited to learn. But what I will say about St. Mary's is that it instills in its graduates the critical thinking skills alongside hands-on work experience and opportunities. And because St. Mary's is a liberal arts institution, the anthropology program couples itself with the mission of a liberal arts curriculum that promotes an exploration of courses to develop a multidisciplinary perspective, which I think has been so beneficial for the work that I do now. And it served me well when I graduated and hopped straight into graduate school. Because I studied Spanish, but also I completed coursework in the concentration in African and African diaspora studies, I really came to graduate school with a full or somewhat or partially realized understanding of the work that I wanted to do. And it really, I think the liberal arts curriculum fits really well with the discipline of anthropology, because anthropology in itself is intradisciplinary, in which each subfield investigates some aspect of human behavior, human biology, communication, societies, both past and present. And it's not unexpected for an anthropology major, especially one at St. Mary's, to be curious to see what else they can couple with the anthropology that they are learning. And oftentimes finding that research and courses in other areas overlap and also supplement the insights that they have, especially when they take coursework in the humanities and other social sciences, as well as in the natural sciences. And I think that multidisciplinary perspective really suited me. It suited my personality, because I'm someone that's very interested in a lot of different things, but I'm glad that's how I decided to forge my academic career. And then when I went on to graduate school at the University of South Florida, that was something that was supported by most faculty members, but at the same time, there was this question of where's the anthropology in this work that I was doing. And I almost, in hindsight, I really worked hard to answer that question, but now I almost feel a bit sorry for those faculty members that weren't convinced, or they felt that I needed to convince them. And that's something that I've had to do multiple times in my career, and sort of convince them how my work is still anthropology. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, I want to talk about the real world experiences that I was able to gain at St. Mary's. So alongside my experience as a student, I was able to work outside the classroom. I worked with Bill for professional projects that were situated within a classroom instruction, but we had a real world client that we worked with. And I thought that was very interesting. And that, I think that allowed me to walk into graduate school and then into my career after graduating with already having practical work experience underneath me. I also had the opportunity to serve as a teaching assistant for multiple classes because I needed the credits to graduate, but also I think my professors really saw my aptitude for teaching and learning, even though I told myself that I didn't want to go into that space. They saw it for me, and they offered me these positions to teach a methods, to co-teach a methods course, as well as to help lead a freshman seminar course and other courses like that as well too. But this wasn't unique to me. This was almost common of most students at St. Mary's, especially those in anthropology, where they had the opportunity to gain these real world be in these real world working settings. So if you're someone that was very much interested in archaeology, you had the opportunity to work on many field schools, both in our backyard at St. Mary's or overseas in Gambia or somewhere else. You had the opportunity to study abroad, as well as complete several service-oriented projects that set us up quite well. And I see St. Mary's was the opportunity for me to gain my foundational knowledge and exploration of anthropology, and then going to graduate school at the University of South Florida, but also the University of Maryland was a place where I think we all sharpened our specializations and sharpened our skills and really learned how to apply theory and methods to a professional workplace setting. And I don't want to oversimplify this by saying that we all walked into graduate school, with this work experience, and graduate school was a cakewalk for us. It was quite challenging at times, but I think I saw myself being a bit more prepared and almost a little bit more weathered than other colleagues that were in my cohort, because I just kind of knew how to navigate the space and navigate the learning in a different way than they may have as a first year graduate student that most people probably didn't necessarily expect. Also, the fact that all of us went to programs that had terminal master's degrees that emphasized networking, presenting at professional conferences, and participating in internships as well. And not just simply facilitating the learning in the classroom, but actually getting in the field and having an opportunity to work with real world clients to gain that experience that complemented our classroom instruction. And I think that really gave me the confidence to get the jobs that I've had and really understand what it is that I do as an anthropologist. And I think early on in my career, I did pose the question of, am I an anthropologist or am I simply doing anthropology? And that's a question that I no longer care to answer anymore. I think now with the work that I'm doing with the Smithsonian and at the African American Museum, I think I've demonstrated that through my skill set. Certainly that was something that I did in my job interview, in which I had to provide a job talk of a potential program that I would develop if I was hired at the museum. And I had to continue to do that in my first year in my position. But now I like to ask myself, am I doing my job right? Is the work and the output that I'm doing, does it justify me getting a bonus at the end of the year? Does it justify me getting a raise or being seen for a promotion? And the only time that I really hear that question isn't from myself anymore, it's actually from other anthropologists. And when I'm in a setting with other anthropologists, mainly at the AAA. And I oftentimes just kind of walk away thinking that I'm so glad that I don't have to ask that question anymore, because I've justified it in explaining my skill sets, opposed to trying to fit myself into a job description. I think Claire said it earlier, is just really elevating the work of that job description and saying, these are the skills that I have, and this is what I gained from anthropology. And I've never once really felt that, neither at St. Mary's or as a graduate student, that I felt that I needed to follow the path of academia. And I'm glad that I did that, because jobs outside of the academy are sometimes just a little bit more exciting, and they pay a little bit more better. And now I feel that I made the right choice for myself. Though there are times when I have to understand if anthropology is enough for me in my position. And certainly now that I see myself as a museum anthropologist, a museum educator, I felt that I'm glad that anthropology was able to unlock this door for me. But if I see myself growing in this position, what else is it that I need? And I decided to go back to school and complete graduate work in museum education and really understand the theories of education and how anthropology supports that, but really how does that inform my work? I think I come with a unique and very nuanced cultural perspective, but now I have to take the work that I have done, but also research of my colleagues in anthropology and history and other disciplines, and really distill that down to an audience that may not really understand this information at all, especially when we're having conversations about African-American history, but also including a social justice component. Really taking such dense and really qualified information, but make it accessible to other people that may be a lay audience, or a term that we use in the museum is uncredentialed experts, that people who are very passionate about this subject and have studied it informally, but just really are looking to the programs that I'm able to produce and provide as a way of sort of actualizing the knowledge that they have. And I think that that level of communication, that level of brokering knowledge is anthropology, but it's also education and in an informal setting. But I'm so glad that anthropology was the path that I took, because it just made that work so much easier for me. And then combining that with more traditional museum theories and practices just accentuates it so much more. I really am so grateful for what St. Mary's has done for me and for my colleagues that are here in this meeting with me, because I think it instilled a level of confidence. It's instilled a level of bravery to just to continue straight into graduate school after graduating, but just really keeping me there, and then just falling forward and falling into the success that I've had, into the various different jobs, and just really learning what it is that I wanted to do, and just feeling confident that, okay, I'm learning new skills, but I have skills that I have. And then finally, as where I'm at now in my career, I really see this is where I want to continue on and really continue to grow this space for myself, but also for others. I'm someone that is very connected to St. Mary's and always am returning in one way or another to provide an alumni presentation, to teach the occasional course as an adjunct, to work with Bill to build a alumni council to provide advice to current students there. Also reaching back to work on different advisory committees within the AAA and understanding how we can expand the knowledge of anthropology beyond the collegial setting, and really looking to how we can expand that into high schools and really get students to understand anthropology, not necessarily to become anthropologists, but understand how anthropology is all around them, and consider maybe as a major, at least a minor, as they enter into college. And using my experience as someone that works within the museum and say that, you don't, anthropology won't lead you down the path of becoming an Indiana Jones, but you can be someone that works in the museum space as an educator, or you can work alongside doctors and health researchers in the field of public health. You can be a medical anthropologist as well too, and combine those two skill sets of public health and medical anthropology. You can be someone that works in development and public health and public policy in the way that Becca has done with her career, and really just do development work. So I'm just really thankful for this opportunity that I've had to share my experience and share it amongst my colleagues. And these are people that are my friends, and you all. And I think I'll cut that there and allow for us to answer some of these questions that I know you all have. And I do want to say hello to my really good friend, Shirley Fisk. Hi, Shirley, how you doing? All righty, Bill, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Les. I didn't know whether Shirley was going to come on. Thanks so much to Les, and really, everybody, Clara, Katie, Becca, and Les. Les, I don't know whether, going back to that earlier question, I want to make one more introduction in a couple of minutes, but there was a question about, let me go back up here. This was it. Right. Hang on a second here. Did I get it? It was the one about interacting with museums. It had to do with ethics, working as an anthropologist, interacting with museums and items that find themselves there. A question about ethics. Let me see if I can get the first part of that question.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think that's the one that got, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. No, how do anthropologists in their work recognize potential ethical problems and collaborate with colleagues to find a conclusion? So I don't know that you all would necessarily speak to, for all anthropologists, but just maybe thinking of a recent, if there is one, an example of an ethical issue that you all have had to deal with, whether in the museums or, people visiting the national park, or I don't know, folks at the hospital or wherever that might be.
I can start answering.
Okay, go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, I think we had started to answer that one a little bit and then sent it on to Les to continue with his presentation. But I kind of was thinking about this. So at least in my experience, like if we identify potential like ethical issues, any kind of issues with that's like museum object related or something, like we have work groups that are dedicated to like helping us work through these problems, and like our regional offices have personnel that kind of specialize in this more, and then like the Washington office, like the overarching Park Service office, has people who develop guidance for us that we follow all the way down at our level. So it's really just a massive team effort. But we have, trainings to help us through these kinds of scenarios. And we have probably the best one is what we have is the Common Learning Portal, which is partially open to the public, but there's also like internal stuff that deals with more sensitive ethical issues. But you, like if you're in a certain group, say it's like a NAGPRO related thing, you can, if you're in that group, you can post a question and hopefully someone will come back to you reasonably quickly with some very good answers or ways forward. So that's just for us.
I can add on to that, especially as Katie really shot that one up. I think, especially in the museum space, I think there, especially when it comes around objects and artifacts, I think there is a lot of discussion around, should this be something that's exhibited, and how are we necessarily interpreting this object and identifying it? This isn't work that I necessarily manage in my day-to-day business day, and during business hours. This is something that definitely has come into consideration a lot. And understanding how objects are repatriated and what does that mean. And especially in the discourse of sort of critical museum studies, there's a lot of great discourse about, for instance, the Benin bronzes from West Africa that are all over the world in different museums, and some are in the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian has begun the process of repatriating them back to West African countries where they can identify their origins. But there's the understanding of, these are objects that have been collected and they should be on display to educate, you know, the masses that come about just the iron craft and the ironwork and bronze work that West African people have done, past tense. And I think when you put something behind glass and folks are able to see it, and it's displaced from the cultural context, people can often look at that as something that people used to do, and that they don't do anymore. These people don't exist. And I think museums are now starting to wrestle with that. And I think a lot of that has been informed by just human rights, but also anthropology has a lot to say about that, and provided just really contextual knowledge and saying that, you know, well, you might be honoring this tradition that is ancient, but it isn't something that's ancient and gone. This is a tradition that is still being done in the present. And you should at least consider having a conversation of, would these people want to have it back and exhibit it themselves in the most appropriate context that they can and they know more about due to their cultural patrimony than you as someone, you know, and especially as museums have grown out of a colonialist tradition, is something that you're almost kind of divorcing and not really informing your visitors about. And these are conversations that I have produced programs about, especially more so about how a lot of monuments have been coming down, Confederate monuments have been coming down. And in DC, the football team has just renamed themselves the Commanders. So if you're a Redskins fan, you know, hold on to your paraphernalia and memorabilia, because the stock on that's going to go up in a couple of years. But just conversations about, just sort of conversations about what does it mean when something is exhibited or identifiers of a culture is used as a mascot. These are conversations that are continually coming up, and certainly now in a space where we're really grappling with conversations about race and ethnicity in more meaningful and earnest ways. I think anthropology has a lot to inform the work that is happening within museums.
Les, thanks for that. Those are great examples, and I also want to thank Kathleen Crane, who's a WAPista, and also president of the National Association for the Practice of Anthropology. She dropped a link into some of the work that NAPA has done on ethics for anybody that wants to copy that out. Before we continue, I'd like to introduce Martha Hare, who is the chair of the WAPA's program committee and was the one who I had proposed this session to, and she brought it before the committee. So Martha had another engagement, but she's come in and joined us. So I'd like to welcome her in to maybe say a couple of words and keep things going until we wrap up. And I'll mute my mic, but I just want to say to Clara, Katie, Becca, and Les, you guys continue to make us very proud here at St. Mary's. So thanks very much for everything.
Could I just add something, Bill? Can you hear me?
Yeah, please do, Shirley.
Shirley, I just wanted to say hi to Liz and say it was a great presentation, very thoughtful. And I'm so glad that you have found a place where you really feel you can settle in and do, you know, education and museum kind of outreach, I guess I would say. I know Les from working on the fishing project that I presented to WAPA at the beginning of the year. He did a great job. And one of the things that he excelled at was building an internship program, which is all about communicating, finding out where people are, bringing them on and getting them experiential learning about fishing along the rivers in the Potomac and the Anacostia. So thank you, and it's great to see you.
Well, thank you, Bill. And this has been great. I did get to see most of it, and it's fantastic. So what we'll do is we'll just open it up to questions for anybody. You could either, Suzanne, did you want to say something right now? Oh, okay. So questions for anybody. You could either, say Les or Clara, or just have any of the panelists respond. It's easiest if you use the hand raising reaction thingy. But I have you on gallery, so I can see people who have their videos on raise their hands. And we'll do that for maybe 20 minutes, and then I'll turn it back to Bill for final comments, and then see if Suzanne has final comments from WAPA. So, okay, Suzanne, you were going like this, so go ahead.
This is, I guess it's a question for everybody who's spoken. I've been impressed by everybody. You've all been able to recognize and make use of opportunities that come before you. Yet you also seem to be not just sort of wandering aimlessly, but you're in control of your career paths. And that's just impressed me to no lengths. I mean, just amazing. And I'm wondering if that's something that you think you got from St. Mary's. Is that something from working together? How does that happen?
I can go. I would say, I think it's a combination of everything, but I think the foundation was laid at St. Mary's. I think I completed the SMP, which is the St. Mary's project, which is your senior's thesis, and you're provided guidance. However, it is independent research that at that point is a capstone project, but it's also sort of a real test of if you're ready to kind of do this work. And I think Bill served as, I think, a lot of our advisors. He certainly was my advisor. And he really was someone that provided us with the knowledge and the sort of theoretical framing of how to do the research, and really guiding us in building our confidence with that, doing that. But then I still had to kind of find my own participants on my own. He did kind of sort of broker conversations, but I had to follow up on that. I had to do my own research in the library and work with reference librarians and have those conversations with them and sort of let them know what are the sources of material that I was looking at. And I had to present it on my own. So I had the guidance, but a lot of it was sort of, okay, little bird, you now can fly on your own. And it was low stakes almost, because if I didn't do well, I didn't get a good grade, and therefore I put my graduation in jeopardy. But overall, I think I did really well and I succeeded. And I just kind of carried that energy with me as I went into graduate school. And then that was reaffirmed as well too, because there was similar structure of doing your research. We're here to guide you, but you have to do it on your own. And then going onto the job market, at that point, it was, okay, I have these small research projects underneath my belt, but I still feel confident enough to apply for this position and tell you about the skills that I have. So I saw Claire, she was shaking her head, so I wonder if she wants to jump in on it.
No, I definitely totally agree, Les. And I distinctly remember going into my master's in public health after coming out of St. Mary's, doing the St. Mary's project, and meeting with my master's advisor for the first time, having already prepared a research plan and what I wanted to do for my master's project, and choosing a project that's slightly more involved than the paper. And they're like, well, you're way ahead of where you should be at this point. And I'm thinking in my head, you haven't done a St. Mary's project. So I've already done this thesis thing. I'm ready. I don't want to go through what I went through before. So I learned very well as less sort of a more supported space. So I felt confident going in. And that wasn't really a trait of my personality. I wasn't a particularly confident person, but I had done it so much. I had no choice just to be confident in what I was doing, because I just knew from empirical evidence that I could do it.
Thank you. I mean, I guess you've had opportunities, and I'm just commenting, this isn't a question. You've had opportunities and you've taken the opportunities, but you haven't just sort of wandered about aimlessly. You take advantage of these opportunities, make use of them, but still know where you're going and what you want, at least. Maybe you don't know where you're going because nobody knows where they're going in life. It just happens. But you seem to not get sidetracked and so on. And I just think that's beautiful.
I think it's important to mention that we're all sort of taking into account what we're interested in at the time and making it relevant with our training as we go along. I am not certain if I could suss out if this was something that is anthropology necessarily as its core in terms of something that's applied around the world, but I know anthropology at St. Mary's and St. Mary's in general had a lot of opportunities for us to sort of know our own mind. A lot of the classes were very discussion based. You were very well rounded in what you were learning and things you were involved in. So when it came time to be in the real world, so to speak, we were all professionals at pivoting and kind of knowing ourselves. And I don't think we give students in general enough credit of knowing what they're actually interested in. So I think that I think someone in the comments actually asked about, how would I improve training to better prepare students? That's one of the things. Give students the confidence and support to explore and know themselves, and realize that there is more than one way to do things. So if they have the opportunity to try something that feels appropriate for them, we should be offering them support and not necessarily criticism.
Great. Thanks.
Katie or Becca, you want to jump in, or should we move on to the next?
I just really agree with what Clara and Les have said in terms of St. Mary's, like laying the foundation and, allowing for a lot of independent research and just kind of, like Les said, pushing out of the nest and fly a little birdie, like all the experiences I got to have outside of the classroom as well were amazing. I didn't think twice about doing them or about, like being hesitant about doing the research I was able to do abroad. And then with the question that in the comment that Clara mentioned, we had definitely thought and talked a lot about that as a group for our SfAA presentation as well. What kind of things would we want to have take, feedback to programs? And one of mine was for undergraduate programs to have a little bit more of the professional preparation, but I also wasn't able to take my applied class at St. Mary's because I was, I think, abroad or something like that. And so just thinking a little bit more about life in the, career world. And then for graduate courses to think a little bit more about, certificates that might encourage, like I was thinking about the PMP before, right? And I didn't know what those kind of skills looked like. From as an anthropologist, I had a lot of qualitative and quantitative research skills, but then the budget management part of things, which is important for nonprofit work, which I went into, I didn't have as much experience in. But I love what Clara said about just allowing undergraduates to kind of have that confidence in doing their research themselves. And there's not just one way to do things. That's definitely what I took from St. Mary's. And I've told this to people who were younger than me at St. Mary's who were considering going to graduate school. I was like, you're going to be fine. Like in my graduate program, I think I was really prepared, like Clara said, for what I went into. Of course, it's not to say it was a piece of cake, but I just remember thinking like, oh, I really had to have these discussions and read these books because I was in a small classroom and they were discussion-based classes and we had to be involved and we had to have opinions and, we had to have discussions about our views. So yeah, I definitely think St. Mary's did a great job of laying that foundation.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I agree with everything that's already been said, just because it's St. Mary's really helped me kind of figure out, I didn't appreciate the St. Mary's anthropology theory stuff until I got to grad school and I was like, I've done this before. Oh my gosh. And things like that. So it was just I realized when I got to grad school how unique an experience it was there. And it really paid off. So there were a lot of people in my cohort who were like, well, I don't know how this discussion thing works. And I'm like, well, you're about to learn, but yeah, I really liked how supportive it was at St. Mary's. So more of that, if an undergrad, would be good for a lot of people.
I want to tackle that question as well too. And I think both at undergraduate and the graduate level, I think it's great to firm up students' interest in the discipline and their particular area of study. And Becca, I think, spoke about this in her discussion, is that St. Mary's has gone under a reorganization in their curriculum where we all had the core curriculum, which was pretty much true to most liberal arts institutions where you take several different courses in your home discipline, but make sure that you fulfill these requirements and say art and English and the sciences. But now the LEAD program really reinforces job readiness. And there have been some majors that were eliminated from the college's offering, which, I mean, we could talk about that, but that's another discussion. But there also have been some new opportunities for students to consider that I think will definitely prepare them in the long run. St. Mary's is unveiling a new business administration major or minor within economics. And I certainly think that undergraduate students should really consider taking courses in that because you gain so many wonderful skills through project management, budgeting, and grant writing that will serve you well no matter what you decide to do. And certainly as a graduate student, that was something that I kind of had wherewithal about, but I really had to firm it once I was in the field in Puerto Rico, where I had to understand that, okay, I have grant money, but let's not spend it all because you got to make this last somehow, and really understand that, budgeting was important in managing those resources. St. Mary's has always kept this tradition of inviting visiting anthropologists who are folks that are emerging in their career as professionals, as well as the distinguished scholar, which are more established luminaries. And I think that all programs, but certainly anthropology programs should do that to show someone that's on the ascent in their career and someone who may be almost sunsetting their career, just to see just both ends of it and really seeing the breadth of what you can do from the various subfields, but sort of how long you can stay in the field and sort of make it your own, and really pushing scholars and professionals that work outside the academy. I think that's the most important thing, is that you have your professors there, but then also show anthropologists working in different work settings. And then lastly is really leaning into your alumni base and checking in with them to see where they're at and getting them to speak to students as well too.
Wow. Thank you. There's a lot of wisdom there. It looks like Matt has a question.
Yes. So this would be for, not just for the 4 presenters, but kind of everybody really. I think we have established both in this presentation and in other presentations that anthropology is needed. Like, employers need anthropology, but they don't know they need it. They don't know that they need it until we're in there. So my question then is, we're making inroads into health, we're making inroads into government to some extent, we're making inroads into museum, all kinds of areas. What is the area that we need to be in the most?
I would say consumer research, to make sure that that's a lot more ethical in how things are marketed to us and what is being said to us as the consumer, opposed to just kind of selling a product, but really telling us why it's good for us and being honest about the product. I think anthropologists have I think that's just my opinion, because I'm starting to question everything that I buy now.
Clara? Okay.
I would advocate for healthcare, public health, of course. Just judging by the amount of rooms I've been in where people get very, very focused on the number or the goal they're trying to hit. As someone who has the anthropology background and the practitioner training, it can be a tough line to straddle. But having an anthropologist in the room can be very important, especially considering these committees and coalitions and groups that are trying to make decisions but have left out the human aspect. So I think it's important that an anthropologist is there to remind them that, these systems are made of people. So consider them too.
Yeah, I wanted to agree, Clara. I'm a medical anthropologist, and medical anthropology, as I know it, is very, very research oriented. It's not necessarily practice oriented. And I'd love to see more anthropologists as hospital administrators, working in community clinics, working in group practices. I think that we could do a lot besides doing a study and publishing it, which is what we do right now, I think. And Martha, you might disagree, I don't know.
No, I'm going to stick my own 2 cents in that it's very frustrating for me to see in the current pandemic lessons that I thought we learned 30 years ago with HIV. Like, all of a sudden, somebody's discovering this great idea that you have to have somebody from the community talk to people about why they need to be vaccinated and make an emotional appeal and not just use data. And it's like, we knew that 30 years ago. So that also brings to mind, because what's different, what's made it worse is I think we need anthropologists in social media very badly. And then the other area is climate. We don't, governments and academics don't communicate well, and we really need to learn how to reach people.
Yeah, to go off that, Martha, I was going to say information science, because I hope to learn more about that and talking about consuming less and consuming information and anthropologists involved in that. Yeah, it reminds me of what you're saying now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've got time for one more question. Okay. Matt is taking me to task. Governments and academics might be the biggest understatement I've heard of the year.
Yeah, true that. True that.
And there's a lot of comments. LTG has just started a project with Nacho, that's one of the national community health officers, I think,
Right.
COVID prevention for refugees, migrants, and immigrants. I think you got to some of these other earlier comments. Somebody said that Les's comments remind me of the Smithsonian race effort, listening sessions in various regions led by anthropologists, which is kind of, you know, it's a very big, I think it can be applied to so many areas.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Bill, thank you so much for bringing these amazing people here. Do you have any thing you want to say to wrap up?
Sure. Thank you. I think my final comment is just that, I've been very fortunate to be at St. Mary's for as many years as I have, and to have, wonderful people who came here as students and now are young colleagues and friends, and you've heard some of them speak today. And what they all talked about, and just to remind us, is that, they've used anthropology to construct a professional pathway to themselves that's not done yet, and they're using anthropology. And I'm finding myself more and more in the classroom is to say, remember, oftentimes you hear that culture, you talk about culture as if it's this noun, it's something that is. And I remind, and I think all four of the speakers tonight show us that culture is something you do, and that, Les and Becca and Clara and Katie have all been culturing and connecting with other people. So they've, used anthropology to build out. But the other thing that I think was real important, and Clara in particular nailed this, is also how they've used anthropology to construct the internal architecture of who they are. So whether they're called an anthropologist or not, and whether that's part of their job title, it's part of who they are. And it's a big part of that, of them just, being a good person. So a good professional person. So I just want to thank everybody again for coming. Special thanks to all the speakers. And I am glad that we had such a great session tonight. So thank you all.
Yeah.
Can I say one last thing before we go? I want to thank everybody, all the speakers, because you're inspiring. I'm an old anthropologist. I'm tired. And you give me a little energy and make me feel that it's still worth doing. So thank you for that. And Bill, congratulations. Congratulations to St. Mary's. You're obviously doing a great job.
Yeah.
Well, we get great students to work with, and we're still learning down here. We're still learning. So you heard some of the things that Les said. The these folks here are some of our best resources for our current students. So again, thanks very much to everybody.
Thanks.
Yo. So we will see you in about 4 weeks. Jerry Moles is here somewhere, and he will be speaking to us, very broadly speaking, it will be on rural anthropology, but much more than that. So we're looking forward to that, and I hope you all come back, and wish you all the very best of luck in your lives. And so thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah. And once again, thank you, Matt, for being that guy behind the screen who runs everything.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That was great. Appreciate it.
Thank
No
you.
problem.
Bye all.